He didn't come back because time passed. That's the first illusion you have to let go of. People love to believe that time changes everything. That distance creates clarity. That silence creates reflection. That absence creates realization. But most of the time just creates distance. And distance doesn't guarantee growth. A man can spend months away from you, living his life, distracting himself, meeting new people, doing whatever he wants, and still come back to you with the exact same mindset he had when he left. Nothing resolved, nothing understood, nothing transformed, only time passed. And that's dangerous, because when you see him return after a long gap, your mind automatically assigns meaning to that gap. You think, he must have thought about me. I must have realized something. He wouldn't come back after this long unless it meant something real. But meaning is something you are creating, not something he is necessarily bringing. You have to separate two things very clearly: the length of his absence and the depth of his growth, because they are not connected. Growth requires discomfort. It requires accountability. It requires facing the truth about your own behavior, and most people avoid that. So instead of growing, they distract. Instead of reflecting, they replace. Instead of evolving, they delay. And when those distractions stop working, they return. Now, this is where it gets real, because when he comes back, he may sound different, more calm, more thoughtful, more aware. He might say things like, "I've been doing a lot of thinking. I needed time to figure things out. I've changed." And part of you wants to believe it, because it gives meaning to the pain you went through. It turns the silence into something purposeful. It makes the waiting feel like it mattered. But words are the easiest thing to adjust. Anyone can say the right thing after time has passed. Anyone can return with a softer tone. Anyone can present a version of themselves that sounds more evolved than they actually are. The real question is not, how does he sound? The real question is, how does he show up over time? Because real change is not visible in the first conversation. It's not visible in the apology. It's not visible in the emotional message he sends when he returns. Real change is visible in consistency. How he communicates, how he handles pressure, how he responds when things are not easy, how he shows up when there is no excitement left. That's where truth lies. And this is where most people make the mistake. They evaluate him based on the moment he comes back, instead of the pattern that follows. The return feels powerful. It feels emotional. It feels meaningful. So they open the door immediately. They engage fully. They give access again. And without realizing it, they skip the most important step, observation, because the moment he comes back is not the moment to reconnect. It's the moment to watch, to slow down, to detach from the excitement, to see clearly. Now let's go deeper into something most people don't want to admit. Sometimes he didn't come back because of you at all. He came back because something else didn't work. When he left, he wasn't just walking away from you. He was walking towards something he believed would be better. Maybe it was another woman. Maybe it was a lifestyle he thought he wanted. Maybe it was the idea of freedom, less responsibility, less expectation, more control. And in his mind, that choice made sense. Because when people leave, they don't leave into nothing. They leave into a belief that something else will give them more excitement, more peace, more satisfaction. And for a while, that belief feels real, because new experiences always feel better in the beginning. They're lighter. They're easier. They're not weighed down by history. There's no conflict yet, no expectations yet, no emotional depth that requires effort, just novelty. But novelty fades. It always does. And when it fades, reality becomes visible. The difference is the effort, the lack of depth, the incompatibility. And suddenly, what felt better doesn't feel better anymore. And this is the moment when your memory returns. Not because he suddenly discovered your value, but because he lost the illusion of something greater. You become familiar again. You become safe again. You become something he understands again. And the mind does something very interesting here. It rewrites the past. Now he starts thinking, she was actually good to me. She cared about me. She understood me better than I thought. And those thoughts feel real to him. They feel like realization. They feel like clarity. But what they actually are is comparison. He is not seeing you more clearly. He is seeing his disappointment more clearly. And in contrast, you appear better. And if you don't understand this, you will interpret his return as emotional growth, when in reality, it may just be the result of failed expectations somewhere else. This is why you have to be careful, because when someone comes back from disappointment, they are not always coming back with intention. Sometimes they are just coming back to something that feels easier. And if you welcome that without awareness, you become a place he returns to, not a person he chooses fully. Now let's go deeper into something that feels even more convincing, because this is where people get pulled back in the strongest. When he says, "I miss you." Those words carry weight. They hit something emotional inside you, because you remember what you shared, the connection, the conversations, the way he used to look at you, the way he made you feel. So when he says he misses you, it feels like validation, like confirmation that what you had mattered. And sometimes he does miss something real, but not always in the way you think. What he often misses is the experience of you, not the responsibility of you. He misses how you listened to him, how you supported him, how you made him feel understood, how you gave him attention without resistance. He misses the emotional space you created, because that space is rare. Not everyone gives that freely. Not everyone shows up with that level of care. And when it's gone, it leaves a gap. But here's what you have to understand clearly. Missing that feeling does not mean he is ready to rebuild something real. He can miss you and still avoid commitment. He can miss you and still repeat the same behavior. He can return without any intention of doing things differently. Because feelings are immediate. They come and go. They don't require discipline. They don't require structure. They don't require responsibility. Commitment does. Change does. Consistency does. So when he comes back expressing emotion, you cannot evaluate him based on how he feels in that moment. You have to evaluate him based on what he sustains over time. Because if you confuse emotion with intention, you will open the door again to the same experiencer with the same outcome. And what comes next is even more subtle, because sometimes he doesn't come back for connection at all. He comes back to see if he still can. Sometimes he doesn't come back because he wants you. He comes back because he wants to know if he still has access to you. And that distinction is where everything changes. You have to understand something about human behavior. When someone has had access to you, your time, your attention, your energy, your emotional availability, that access doesn't just disappear in their mind, even after months of silencer. Part of him assumes, if I reach out, she'll respond, not because you said it, but because that was the dynamic before. He remembers how you used to show up, how you replied, how you cared, how you stayed even when things were uncertain, and that memory creates a belief. She's still there? So when he comes back, he's not always coming back to reconnect. Sometimes he's coming back to test that belief. He sends something simple. Hey, how have you been? Just checking on you, low effort, low risk, no vulnerability. And then he waits, because your response tells him everything if you respond quickly. If you respond warmly, if you respond like nothing happened, you answer the question for him. Yes, he still has access. And the moment he gets that confirmation, something shifts, because the goal was never connection. The goal was reassurance. Reassurance that he still matters. Reassurance that he still has influence. Reassurance that he didn't lose you completely. And once that reassurance is received, his behavior often changes again. He slows down. He becomes inconsistent. He pulls back slightly, not because he hates you, but because the question in his mind has already been answered. And this is the pattern that confuses people the most, because it feels like he came back and then disappeared again. But if you look closely, he didn't disappear randomly. He completed what he came for. He checked if the door was still open. And when he saw that it was, he no longer needed to knock. That's why you feel that emotional drop, that confusion, that sense of, what just happened? What happened is that you responded emotionally to a situation that required observation. You assumed his return meant intention, when in reality, it may have just meant curiosity mixed with ego. And ego is a powerful driver. People don't like losing access to something they once had, especially if that something gave them value. You were not just a person to him, you were an experience of attention, comfort, validation, emotional safety. And when that experience disappears, a part of him wants to know, can I still get that back if I want it? Not necessarily because he plans to stay, but because he wants to know if he can. And this is why your response matters more than his message. Because his message is just a test. Your response is the result. If you give full access immediately, you remove all uncertainty, you remove all tension, you remove all reason for him to invest. Because access without effort teaches him something. It teaches him that nothing has changed. That he can leave, come back, and still receive the same energy. And once that pattern is confirmed, it repeats. Now here's where it gets even more subtle, because sometimes he doesn't even realize he's doing this consciously. It's not always calculated. It's not always intentional. It's a pattern, a learned behavior based on past interactions. He reaches out, you respond, he feels validated, he relaxes, and the cycle continues. But from your perspective, it feels emotional. It feels meaningful. It feels like something is happening again. And that's where the disconnect is, because you are experiencing it as connection, while he may be experiencing it as confirmation. And those are not the same thing. Now let's talk about another layer of this, because access is one part, but there's something underneath it that drives a lot of this behavior. Loneliness, not deep, meaningful loneliness, not the kind that creates transformation. The temporary kind, the kind that shows up late at night, the kind that appears when life feels quiet, the kind that makes people reach for something familiar. And in those moments, you come to mind, not because he suddenly built a future in his head with you, but because you are a known source of comfort. You are someone who once responded, someone who once cared, someone who once made things feel easier. So he reaches out, not with a plan, not with clarity, just with a feeling. And feelings are temporary. That's why this matters. Because if his return is driven by loneliness, his presence will also be temporary. He connects. He feels better. And then he drifts again. And you're left trying to understand something that was never stable to begin with. This is why you cannot evaluate his return based on how it feels in the moment. Because the moment is emotional. But patterns are logical. And if you don't look at the pattern, you will keep reacting to moments that were never meant to last. And there's one more reason that is even more dangerous than this, because it feels like effort, it feels like interest, it even looks like progress, but it keeps you stuck longer than anything else. There's a reason he comes back. That confuses people more than anything else, because it looks real, it feels real, it even sounds real. And that's what makes it dangerous. Sometimes he comes back and actually tries. Not perfectly, not consistently enough, but enough to make you believe something is different. He texts more. He calls occasionally. He shows a little more attention. He says things that sound more thoughtful. And now you're not just confused, you're hopeful. Because this version of him feels closer to what you always wanted. Not fully there, but closer. And that almost is what keeps you emotionally invested. This is where many people get stuck. Not in the clear rejection, not in the silence, but in the inconsistency that feels like progress. Because your mind starts filling in the gaps. You think, he's trying, he's different now. He just needs time. This could actually work. But here's the truth you have to face in. Partial effort is not transformation. It's adjustment. And adjustment is often temporary. When someone truly changes, you don't feel confused. You don't feel like you're analyzing every message. You don't feel like you're guessing where you stand. You don't feel like you're waiting for consistency. You feel clarity. Because real intention does not create emotional instability. It creates direction. So if he comes back and gives you just enough to keep you engaged, but not enough to feel secure, you are not witnessing growth. You are experiencing a pattern where he increases effort, just enough to pull you back in. And once you're emotionally reattached, that effort slowly fades again. Not all at once, not dramatically, just gradually. And because it fades slowly, you don't react immediately. You adjust. You justify. You tell yourself, He's just busy. He's going through something. He was better before. Maybe he'll get back to that. And in doing that, you extend the cycle. Because now you're no longer responding to who he is. You're responding to who he almost is. And almost can last a very long time. Long enough to drain your energy, long enough to confuse your judgment, long enough to make you question yourself. Because you start wondering, am I expecting too much? Am I being impatient? Maybe I should just give him more time. But the real question is not, is he trying sometimes? The real question is he consistent enough to build something real? Because relationships are not built on moments. They are built on patterns. And if the pattern is unstable, the outcome will be unstable. Now let's go even deeper, because there's another reason he comes back that feels like the strongest one of all. Regret. Sometimes he genuinely feels like he made a mistake. He looks back, he reflects, he compares. He recognizes things he didn't see before. And for the first time, he feels the weight of losing you, not just the comfort, not just the attention, you. And this is the moment people wait for. This is the version of the story everyone hopes is true, because it feels like he finally realized my worth. And sometimes that's partially true. But even here, you have to be careful, because regret is a feeling, and feelings do not guarantee change. He can regret losing you and still not be capable of showing up differently. He can miss you deeply and still repeat the same behaviors. He can want you back and still not be ready to build something stable, because recognizing value is not the same as sustaining it. Understanding something is not the same as embodying it. Feeling something is not the same as committing to it. So even when his return feels sincere, you cannot rely on sincerity alone. You have to look for structure. Is he consistent? Is he clear? Is he intentional? Or is he emotional without direction? Because emotion without direction creates cycles, and cycles keep you stuck. This is why some people go through the same situation over and over again. He leaves, he comes back, he shows effort, he fades again, and every time it feels slightly different. But the pattern is the same. And until you recognize the pattern, you will keep interpreting each return as a new opportunity, instead of what it actually is, a repeated dynamic. Now here's where your power comes in, because once you see this clearly, something shifts. You stop reacting immediately. You stop attaching meaning too quickly. You stop getting pulled in by temporary change. You start observing. You start asking, what is consistent here? What is actually different? What is he sustaining over time? And most importantly, you stop filling in the gaps for him. Because when someone is truly different, you don't have to guess. You don't have to analyze. You don't have to convince yourself. You can see it. And what we're about to get into next is the reason that ties all of this together. The one that explains why he can come back again and again without ever fully changing. And once you understand it, you stop getting caught in the cycle completely. There's one final layer to all of this that most people never fully see, because it's not about what he says. It's not even about what he feels. It's about what he's able to do. And sometimes the real reason he comes back is because he never had the capacity to do anything differently in the first place. Not then, not now. This is the part that's hard to accept, because it removes the idea that there's a right moment where everything suddenly changes. Sometimes there is no right moment. There is just a pattern repeating itself with the same person in slightly different forms. He comes back because coming back is easy. It's familiar. It's comfortable. It requires less effort than building something new. You already understand him. You already have history. You already have emotional connection. So returning to you feels natural to him, but building something stable with you, that requires something he may not have developed. Consistency, emotional discipline, accountability, the ability to stay present when things are no longer exciting. And if those things are missing, it doesn't matter how many times he comes back, the outcome will stay the same, because behavior always follows capacity, not intention, not words, not even feelings. Capacity, what he is actually capable of sustaining over time. And if his capacity hasn't changed, his pattern won't either. This is why he can come back multiple times. and still create the same experience because nothing fundamental has shifted inside him. Only the circumstances around him have changed, and when circumstances change, he returns. When he feels lonely, when something else doesn't work, when curiosity kicks in, when he wants reassurance, when he feels regret, he comes back. But when stability is required, he disappears again. And this is where your awareness becomes everything. Because once you see that clearly, you stop asking, why does he keep coming back? And you start asking, why does nothing actually change when he does? That question is where your power is. Because now you're no longer focused on his return. You're focused on the pattern. And patterns tell the truth that moments try to hide. A single message can feel meaningful. A single conversation can feel deep. A single apology can feel sincere. But none of those things matter if they are not followed by consistency. And consistency is the only thing that creates something real, not intensity, not history, not emotion. Consistency. So when he comes back again, and part of you feels that pull, that curiosity, that emotional reaction, you don't ignore it. But you don't follow it blindly either. You observe. You give space. You allow time to reveal the truth. Because time, when used correctly, doesn't create illusions. It exposes patterns. And if you allow enough time, without rushing back into old dynamics, you will see exactly what this is. Not what you hope it is. Not what it feels like in the moment, but what it actually is. And sometimes, what it actually is not enough. Not because you're asking for too much, but because he's offering too little. And that's a truth you have to be willing to accept. Because the moment you accept that, you stop trying to make sense of his behavior and you start making decisions for yourself. You stop waiting for him to be different. And you start asking yourself, is this enough for me? Is this consistent? Is this stable? Is this something I can actually build on? And if the answer is no, then no matter how many times he comes back, you don't have to go back with him. That's the shift. Because his return is not the opportunity. Your awareness is, your ability to see clearly, to slow down, to stop reacting automatically. That's what changes everything. Because when you stop being available for confusion, you naturally become aligned with clarity. And clarity doesn't chase mixed signals. It chooses stability. If this gave you a different way to see things, then you already understand something most people don't. This isn't about whether he comes back. It's about what you do when he does. Because that decision is what shapes your experience moving forward. If you want more content like this, where you learn how to read behavior clearly, how to stop overanalyzing mixed signals, and how to build real standards for yourself, then subscribe and stay connected. And if you've ever been in this situation where someone left, came back, and nothing really changed, leave a comment. I see the pattern now. Because once you see it, you don't unsee it. And that's where everything begins to change.